to get this book, we really have to do what we've done every other time and just kind of like zoom out and say, where are we at in the story? And without going into much detail, we had Joshua. So Joshua brought the people of Israel into the land, but then we had Judges. You guys remember the book of Judges? We talked about it. It was gnarly, right? It was a mess. It was about the people of Israel in the land, and Moses had said they're going to turn away from God and all that stuff. But y'all remember, I think it was Judges 19? And that was a gnarly story. Well, that's kind of where we're at. And there's a phrase all through the book of Judges, and actually the book of Judges ends with it. It's right here. So it's Judges 21:25. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. That's how Judges ended, right? Like, there's no king and everybody just does whatever they want. And we saw what that looked like. Well, that sets us up for something. It's like, we need a king. We need somebody that can unify this nation and lead us in righteousness. And so, I mentioned at the end of last time we met, like, that's moving us in now to meet like Samuel and Solomon and King David. But then we get this little story right here, the book of Ruth. And what the book of Ruth does is it connects us in some ways and prepares us in some ways for the transition from Judges to the time of the kings. And we're going to see that open up in like Samuel and stuff like that. But that's what Ruth is doing. It's connecting us. And in case I forget, I hope I won't forget, but the book of Ruth ends with a little genealogy. This guy beget this guy beget this guy. And that genealogy ends with who? Do you guys know? David. Yeah. So what we're getting to see is the book of Ruth is a pretty interesting story, but it's kind of normal everyday stuff, to be honest. It's just kind of like life and times of this Israelite people. And so what's the big deal? Why is this little story in the Bible? And I think what we're seeing here is we're seeing God's sovereignty in the background to use the everyday life of an Israelite woman from a small town called Bethlehem. This Israelite woman from a small town in Bethlehem to fulfill and bring about this grand narrative that we've looked at from Genesis up to this point. It's just like an everyday life, an everyday story, but God is working in these little actions to bring about his plan. And that's what the book of Ruth does for us. So if we zoom out and we see it in the big scale, these little details of these random people's lives is like, whoa, that's incredible. And I think there's pastoral implications in this for us, because it's like my everyday life just seems like what does this have to do with anything? Or what does this little decision have to do? Or I'm going to leave after this and go get some lunch and probably end up at Converge. What does that have to do with anything? It's like, well, I don't want to make too much of my story, but maybe God is working in the midst of the everyday monotony, because he seemed to be doing that here. I think that's important to see. We don't want to make our stories like these grand things because we're a part of a bigger story, but yet God in his big story cares about each one of us where we're at. And the book of Ruth really does communicate that to us. So that's the book of Ruth, kind of the overarching, some of the cool things we see there. But let me read the first verse. I really think we could read together. We'll read portions, maybe not from this first chapter, but I do want to read this first verse and just kind of listen to what's going on. Now it came about in the days when the judges governed, or when the judges ruled. So this is during the time, again, we're 21st century looking back, and that's actually good, because we can read this and say, those judges, I remember that time. That was not good. And the author is introducing us to this time and saying, hey, this story I'm about to tell you, it's during the judges period. And everybody in the room goes, or I remember that. So that's kind of the point here. It's when the judges ruled. There was a famine in the land. Again, this verse is packed. Why is there a famine in the land? It's probably because Israel and the judges are acting like fools in the land. And that's what happens. God removes his hand when people turn from him. So already this verse is completely packed. But it's all setting the stage. There was a famine in the land in the time of the judges, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the land of Moab with his wife and his 2 sons. Again, packed. We came across a town right here. There's a man named, what's his name again? Let me get it right. I lost him. Oh, we haven't seen his name. Next verse, Elimelech is going to be his name, but he's in the town of where? He's in this little area of where? Starting with a B. Bethlehem. Who else is from Bethlehem? Jesus, right? He's the most important one. And who else?
David. Right?
Correct, David. How does Jesus connect with Bethlehem? Well, we find out beginning the reason that we know, or the reason that Jesus is connected to Bethlehem, all that begins with this book right here. So again, we're seeing just this little story that's thrown in here that's like 4 chapters, and it begins to connect Jesus and Bethlehem and King David. All these big themes that come up later, they have their origin in the book of Ruth. So again, big thing right there. And last thing I'll point out, famine. This guy named Elimelech travels from Bethlehem to Moab. So Moab is not in the land of Israel. It is on the east side of the Dead Sea, I think is where it is. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But they're leaving the promised land. They're leaving the land. They're leaving their family to actually sojourn out into Moab because there's such a terrible famine, right? And that's kind of like the crisis moment that sets up the story for us. So all that said, verse 1 is completely packed with significance. But I want to just throw it out to you guys. What happens next? Did you guys get a chance to read? They go into Moab. This guy and his family. What happens next?
Her sons and her husband died.
Yeah. Plot thickens. It gets bad quick. We have what chapter 1 does for us is it gives us the storyline, kind of the plot line to show here's the issue, but it also introduces the characters of the story for us. And one of the main characters is Naomi, and Naomi with her family in the land of Moab, she enters into a very trying trial, right? It's not just a trial, it's like total life shift. Her husband dies. After her husband dies, her sons take wives of the Moabite women. Were they supposed to do that? They weren't supposed to do that. But they do it, okay? But then her sons die, and she's left a widow in a foreign land during a famine with 2 Moabite daughters-in-law. Like, for us, that's like, oh, that stinks. For them, this would have been like, to be a widow in the ancient world where, especially during a famine, is like, you're done for. Like, your life is over. You're going to be a beggar the rest of your life. That's it. That's it. So what's her plan? Like, is she's like, I can't just stay in this land. Let me at least go back to the land that I came from. So she travels back to Bethlehem, and everybody's surprised to see her. But before she goes, she's like, I don't want to take my daughters-in-law back to the life that I'm about to be faced with. Let me at least tell my 2 daughters-in-law to go back and be with their family. Go back to your Moabite family. Maybe they'll take care of you. I'm going to go back and live my life as this begging widow, because that's where she's going. But what happens?
Ruth is like, nope.
Yeah.
I would follow.
Yeah. So the first daughter-in-law says, okay, I'll go back to my family. She's not too happy about it. But then we get this character named Ruth, a Moabite woman it's got a lot of tenacity. And she decides, no, I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to go back to your land. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. We can't let this pass us by. That a woman from the nations, we know the nations, they were scattered, they were given other gods to rule over them, other spiritual beings, but Yahweh took his people. But now someone out here from the nations is saying, I'm going to give my allegiance to the God of Israel. That's what's happening. That's what's happening with Ruth. So let me get where I'm at. Yeah, let me read it. Chapter 1, verse 17. Actually, I'll start in 16. Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people. Your God shall be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there be buried. Thus," and this is great, "thus may Yahweh do to me and worse, if anything but death parts you and me." What we're seeing here is clearly Ruth is being discipled in the ways of the Lord. Like, her mother-in-law has been a good mother-in-law. She's taught her well. And she's being discipled into, she even invokes the name of Yahweh in this passage. We saw when it says Lord, it's the Yahweh thing. So this is a significant moment. It's a significant moment. But let's keep moving forward. Any questions or things that stood out to you guys in the first chapter? Pretty straightforward. Cool. So she goes back to Bethlehem, Naomi does, with her daughter-in-law, and she's like, I gotta change my name. Actually, was she even Naomi at that point? So she's Naomi, but she wants to call her name Mara, which means bitterness. Anyway, so that's just telling us basically what her life is going to be like. She's expecting it to be just a bitter life. With that said, now let's pick up. Somebody read 1 through 11, or we can break it up. Maybe, unless somebody wants to just do that full area, 1 through 11. Chapter 2, 1 through 11.
Okay.
You cool with that much?
Good.
Cool. Loud and proud.
Ruth works in Boaz's field. Now there was a wealthy and influential man in Bethlehem named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi's husband, Elimelech. One day Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go out into the harvest fields to pick up the stalks of grain left behind by anyone who is kind enough to let me do it." Naomi replied, "All right, my daughter, go ahead." So Ruth went out to gather grain behind the harvesters, and as it happened, she found herself working in a field that belonged to Boaz, the relative of her father-in-law Elimelech. While she was there, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you," he said. "The Lord bless you," the harvesters replied.
Let me pause you here. So a few significant things that we actually should probably look at here. One, the author set us up with something in verse 1, once again here in this little transition period. Naomi had a kinsman of her husband, a man of great wealth of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Right here, the author wants us to see something, because the authors that wrote this know, these people just read Deuteronomy, right? Because we just read Deuteronomy. So they know about this thing called a kinsman or a redeemer, a kinsman redeemer. The word, we don't actually find, I don't think the exact word until the beginning of chapter 3. Though maybe we do. I don't know Hebrew, so that I won't be able to tell exactly. But have you guys ever heard of the kinsman redeemer kind of concept? Somebody explain it to me.
It's kind of like where you have someone and everything is like not going well, or basically some other life. There's a kinsman redeemer of like a family that's like somewhat related or something like that. But they go to the kinsman redeemer and he basically like restores everything that was lost. I think that could be really wrong, but
Yeah. You got the basics of it. Anybody else want to help him out?
I'll say something like, so if there were two brothers, one was married to a woman and her husband dies, and that brother, he's obligated to become her husband then and kind of restore her, so she's no longer a widow, but she becomes a wife again. Because like you said, being a widow back then, you're like, that's it. You ain't got much to go for.
Yeah. Correct. So that, believe it or not, is actually not connected with the Redeemer, and yet that finds its way into this story as well. It seems like maybe this happened, I don't know all the, is it etymology? That's probably the wrong word for it, but I don't know all the development of ideas, But basically what they seem to have done is they've taken the Redeemer, which I'll talk about here in just a second, the Redeemer idea and what you just talked about, and kind of meshed the two of them together. Where if you're redeeming like land for somebody, you're also going to be taking, if you're a next of kin, you're going to take this man's wife as well. But what the Torah says in Deuteronomy 25, 5 through 6, exactly what you said. When brothers live together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the deceased shall not be married outside the family to a strange man, which would be probably not great. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her to himself as wife and perform the duty of a husband to her brother. Duty of a husband's brother to her, It shall be that the firstborn whom she bears shall assume the name of the dead brother, so that the name will not be blotted out from Israel. And basically what this did was this like protected property. It protected the name of the family member that's like, you want to keep your family's name going, stuff like that. So that connect was specifically for brothers. And what we're seeing here is there's not actually brothers. I don't think it doesn't say, it says a close relative. These aren't actually brothers in the situation, and yet they adopt it in this situation. So there's been some development in the way they read the Torah or whatever, but they mesh the two ideas together. So the Redeemer, though, the kinsman Redeemer thing would be like, let's say we can even take this situation. So Naomi's husband died, and that means that the land is now the land has to be bought by someone who's a close relative, or else it's gonna be lost from the family. So like Naomi's tribe, they're allotted this land and they can't leave the family, so somebody has to buy it back from them. Well, the closest kin would come along and say, yes, I will buy this land back from my brother so that the land doesn't leave our family and doesn't leave our tribe. That's what the kinsman redeemer is. There's a few other things that they would actually redeem as well. I think it's Deuteronomy, I don't remember where it's at. I want to say 7, but it might be 17, where it talks about the kinsman redeemer. But you can just Google it, type it in. It's pretty interesting. But that's the background for the book of Ruth, is the kinsman redeemer thing. So, but all that to say, that's the background. The authors want us to see in this first section here, oh, Naomi's husband has a relative. I know what this means. And sure enough, she finds herself in, so Ruth, again, she goes out, she wants to glean. Does anyone know what gleaning is, actually? That's an important fact. Yeah?
I don't know if I have the exact definition. It was like they go behind the workers in the field, they kind of like pick up all the scraps and stuff that they left behind when they harvest the wheat.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And what that was it was a safeguard for the poor. So this is written in Torah. God cares for the poor. He cares for the foreigner who's in the land. And so he says, when you go and you harvest your fields, you're not supposed to go back through it twice. But you're supposed to leave what was left behind you for the poor to come through and gather behind you. So that was to give something like for the poor who didn't have, any other way to get food other than begging and stuff. They could come and they could find food. What's interesting is Jesus and his disciples were doing that. They were gleaning a field on the Sabbath. And that's one of the times that the Pharisees came and were like, what are you guys doing? You're working on the Sabbath. And yeah, Jesus takes issue with them. But this is, an example of that. So her and her mother-in-law are they're poor, they're begging, and she's like, I'm gonna go glean. But she finds herself in the land, in the field of Boaz, this guy. But one more thing, and then we'll read forward. Look at verse 4 for me. Remember, we're in the time of the judges. So Israel's not great. But yet, look at the picture we get of this guy Boaz. We're supposed to see this. Verse 4. Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, may the Lord be with you. And they said to him, may the Lord bless you. Right here, we're starting to see the character of this guy. Oh, this seems to be a faithful Israelite. He actually cares about Yahweh and what Yahweh says and what Yahweh thinks. He's even blessing in the name of Yahweh. So that's, I think, supposed to jump out to us to say, okay, we're in the time of the judges. Things aren't great. There's even a famine. But though the Lord he's being kind to Israel at this point. But right here, this guy Boaz jumps off the page. Right? Okay. Christian, you want to keep reading?
Yeah,
Or-
let's do it.
Okay. 5 to 11.
Then Boaz asked his foreman, "Who is that young woman over there? Who does she belong to?" And the foreman replied, "She is the young woman from Moab who came back with Naomi. She asked me this morning if she could gather grain behind the harvesters. She has been hard at work ever since, except for a few minutes' rest in the shelter." Boaz went over and said to Ruth, "Listen, my daughter, stay right here with us when you gather grain. Don't go to any other fields. Stay right behind the young woman working in my field. See which part of the field they are harvesting, and then follow them. I have warned the young men not to treat you roughly. And when you are thirsty, help yourself to the water they have drawn from the well." Ruth fell at his feet and thanked him warmly. "What have I done to deserve such kindness?" she asked. "I am only a foreigner." "Yes, I know," Boaz replied, "but I also know about everything you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I have heard how you left your father and mother and your own land to live here among complete strangers."
It's good. Again, I can't overstate this. We're supposed to pretend like we're looking back on this and saying, what is the state of Israel right now? How are they doing? And we've just been through the judges, and they're not good. But we just saw a faithful Israelite taking care of the foreigner, right? That's what's going on. So verse 10, she asked the blatant question, "Why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me since I am a foreigner?" Another background piece that we need to bring in at this point is the relationship between Israel and Moab. It's not a good relationship. They're actually enemies, the Moabites and Israel. And so right here, Ruth is coming in, like the narrator even said, Ruth the Moabite. He said that several times. So when we're reading over this, we're like, she's a foreigner and she's a Moabite. Ugh. Because the relationship is not good. And so Israel, especially later on, as they're looking back on this, they're going to say, our enemy, she's one of our enemies, actually. And yet she's given her allegiance to the God of Israel. And right here, the faithful Israel, the covenant faithful Israelite, Boaz, is being kind to the foreigner. That was in the Torah. That was a major part of the Torah. How are you treating the foreigner in your midst? Boaz is being the contrast to the time of the judges. Cool. Well, the rest of the chapter is basically Boaz, lots of kindness to Ruth. Ruth comes back to her mother-in-law, explains this, what happened, the kindness of this man. She's got grain and barley with her. She brings food back. And Naomi, in verse 20, in response, she said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed of the Lord who has not withdrawn his kindness to the living and to the dead." In other words, the Lord is taking care of us, but the Lord is also showing kindness to my dead husband. Why? Again, Naomi said to her, "This man is our relative. He is one of our close relatives," or the word is redeemers. The Lord has shown kindness to my husband because this man is a redeemer. He could buy it back. The rest of that chapter just basically, she encourages her to keep going to this field and gleaning. So, any thoughts or comments from chapter 2? I know, we're making big deals out of small little points, but those things are in there for us to pick up on. Say, oh, this is what's going on in the story. But any questions from that chapter?
Every time I used to read it, when I was younger, whenever Boaz is like, "Who's that young woman over there? Who does she belong to?" And I was always like, "Ooh."
Yeah, I mean,
got her eye.
I think that's what's happening.
So, did Ruth know at the time when she picked Boaz's field that he was a kinsman redeemer? Or did she not know that until Ruth came home to Naomi and they connected the dots?
I don't know. It would have, the story doesn't tell us exactly. It almost seems like she just found herself in the field of this guy. Though the story in verse 1, it does say, here's the kinsman. There's a kinsman of Elimelech named Boaz, and then it just goes right into, now Ruth wants to go glean. So it doesn't tell exactly. It might have though. She might have.
It seems like the authors are wanting us to understand like what the situation is and who he is, and then kind of that she may, because that really shows God's providence that she just so
Think
happens
so.
to pick Boaz's field, and he is a kinsman redeemer, which
Yeah.
could, restore a lot. So
Yeah, I think so. Because clearly, like, this book is about God's providence in the background. So I agree. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, anybody else?
you're doing a great job. I love this. This is awesome.
Thank you. Cool. Well, let's jump into chapter 3. Somebody read 1 through, sorry. Let's go 1 through 12. Anybody want to take that big a chunk? Yeah, go for it, man.
One day Naomi said to Ruth, "My daughter, it's time that I found a permanent home for you, that you will be provided for. Boaz is a close relative of ours, and he's been very kind by letting you gather grain with his young women. Tonight he will be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. Now do as I tell you, take a bath and put on perfume and dress in your nicest clothes. Then go to the threshing floor and don't let Boaz see you until he has finished eating and drinking. Be sure to notice where he lies down, then go and uncover his feet and lie down there. He will tell you what to do."
I'll pause you here because we should probably talk about this. So first of all, verse 1 again in this chapter, not that there were chapters in the original, but we're seeing breaks. Verse 1 kind of shows us the point of where we're headed now. So I'll read my version. It kind of says it, I think, a little bit better for us. So then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to Ruth, "My daughter, shall I not seek security for you?" So what she's saying is basically, I need to find you a better situation than where we're at, and I'm going to look for a security or a covering for you. That's the situation, and she's got a plan. Now, is not Boaz our kinsman? He's our redeemer. With whose maids you were with? And she knows he's going to be at the winnowing area, which is basically where you divide like the good grain from the bad grain. They're basically doing the harvesting part. But she comes up with this plan. She's like, "Hey, put on some perfume, put on your best clothes, get looking nice, okay?" Yeah, right. So the reason this would be is Ruth just lost her husband not too long ago, and so she's not. The sign of that is you would not dress up nicely. You would be in like mourner's clothes. But Naomi's basically like, make it clear that you're available, okay? And so go down to where he's going to be at. Wait till they've eaten and drank a little bit. And the story, I love how it says. Actually, it's in a few more verses. Never mind. But go lay down next to him and uncover his feet.
It's kind of a devious plan.
I don't know what the exact cultural thing is. I read a couple of commentaries. I didn't have time to dig into it too much. But what's not happening here is like blatant sexual stuff. But there is some innuendo going on there. Like she's
Not the feet.
yeah. So there's a little bit of that going on, but I think what we're seeing is probably like a cultural thing happening. It's going to get a little bit clearer though in the next few verses. But just to say, she's getting fixed up because she was in mourning, and she's going down to where they're going to be separating the grain, and the feet thing. I don't know, but she knows that Yeah, I'll stop. Somebody read. Ty, do you want to keep reading?
Sure.
And you good? Yeah. Okay. 5 through 12.
Great job, Ty.
Yeah, you are doing good.
I will do everything. I will do everything you say. Ruth replied. She went down to the threshing floor that night and followed the instructions of her mother-in-law. After Boaz had finished eating and drinking, he was in good spirits. He lay down at the far end of the pile of grain and went to sleep. Then Ruth came quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. Around midnight, Boaz suddenly woke up and turned over. He was surprised to find a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asked. I am your servant Ruth, and she replied, Spread the corner of your covering over me, for you are my family redeemer. The Lord bless you, my daughter, Boaz exclaimed. You are showing even more family loyalty now than you did before, for you have not gone after a younger man, whether rich or poor. Now don't worry about a thing, my daughter. I will do what is necessary, for everyone in town knows you are a virtuous, thank you, woman. But while it's true that I am one of your family redeemers, there is another man who is more closely related to you than I am.
So, I mean, this is just like a Cinderella story right here. Is Boaz, does he like the idea? Yeah, he seems to be pretty okay with it. Where does he say it? May you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better than the first by not going after young men, whether rich or poor. So, he's in on the idea. He likes it.
Paying attention.
To what?
You're paying attention to her.
Yeah, clearly. Yeah, definitely has. Right. So, again, you just gotta love the Bible. I mean, it's true to life, and it's good. Anyway, but I did want to point out this. What does she say? Where is it in verse 9? I am Ruth, your maid, so spread your cover over your maid, for you are a close relative. So this is kind of what we're seeing here. It's not like, again, we could see it as like a sexual innuendo, but what it is, it's a sign of covering for security. She's saying, will you take me under your protection as a bride, basically is what's going on. And he agrees. And the rest of the chapter is just him saying go back to sleep. We're going to wake up. We're going to get you out of here before anybody else sees you. And he sends food and provision with her as she goes back. But he's good with it, except there's a plot twist. There's I don't know the literary term, like if you're in literature, of that the problem that comes into the story, like everything's going good, and then there's a problem that has to be resolved. What is that called? Does anybody know?
Conflict.
Is that what it is? Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, well, you know what I'm talking about. So there's the problem that enters in that now we have to get resolved. And you got handsome Boaz, who's rich and like a prince, and then you've got this random relative that's closer. It's like, who's this guy? So we got to get that resolved. So that's where the rest of the story picks up. Boaz, he's a faithful Israelite. He is faithful to the covenant, and he knows Torah. He knows if there's a closer relative than me, he's got to be the one that redeems you. So, but he's got a little plan. He knows what's going on. So, somebody, let's just read this. I think it's good. Somebody read 1 through, let's go 1 through 4. We'll just break it up. Somebody do 1 through 4.
Boaz marries Ruth. Boaz went to the town gate and took a seat there. Just then a family redeemer he had mentioned came by. So Boaz called out to him, come over here and sit down, friend. I want to talk to you. So they sat down together. Then Boaz called 10 leaders from the town and asked them to sit as witnesses. And Boaz said to the family redeemer, Naomi, who came back from Moab, she is selling the land that belonged to our relative,
Elimelech, yep.
I thought I should speak to you about it, so that you can redeem it if you wish. If you want the land, then buy it here in the presence of these witnesses, but if you don't want it, let me know right away, because I am next in line to redeem it after you. The man replied, all right, I'll redeem it.
Oh, man.
Yikes.
What's gonna happen?
Okay, I'll redeem it. Cool.
Yeah?
You'll cover that.
So, what does Boaz not throw in yet?
So he has to marry Ruth.
There's an additional portion to redeeming this. Maybe I can just go over some of this. So he's gone to the gate. He's called the elders. This is just ancient stuff. Like, this is where the wise people would sit and they would discuss stuff and make decisions for the town or whatever. But the relative comes by and he says, hey, here's the situation. What you think? He says, yeah, I'll take it. But then Boaz, he has his plan. He knows that, well, I'll stop. Let's actually read it, and then I'll say it. So somebody keep reading. Go through verse 8.
Yeah, I got you.
You're doing good. You got a good Boaz voice.
Then Boaz told him, of course your purchase of the land from Naomi also requires that you marry Ruth, the Moabite widow. That way she can have children who will carry on her husband's name and keep the land in the family. Then I can't redeem it. The family redeemer replied, because this might endanger my own estate, you redeem the land. I cannot do it. Now in those days it was in custom in Israel for anyone transferring a right of purchase to remove his sandals and hand it to the other party. The publicity validated the transaction, so the other family redeemer drew off his sandals as he said to Boaz, you buy the land.
So back to verse 5. I imagine that Boaz, when he said this, on the day that you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also acquire Ruth the Moabite. So he probably leans into that a little bit because, again, the reaction kind of shows us what's in the mind and heart of the other guy. He sees the foreigner, the Moabite, and immediately says, I don't know about that. I don't know if I want to go there. He comes up with something about my land would be in danger or something. My inheritance would be in danger. But the issue, I think, for him is it's a foreigner. I'm an Israelite. I don't want to enter into that. But Boaz sees Ruth's faithfulness to the God of Israel, that she is a loyal, very kind woman, and he's taking care of this foreigner, right? So again, we're seeing the character of Boaz in contrast to another, maybe less faithful Israelite. Now, maybe I'm stretching that a little bit, but I think that's what we're supposed to see here. He says, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it for you. So he takes Ruth he does the shoe thing, which is basically, I think, I read something about that years ago. I think that, the exchanging of the sandal is saying, hey, I'm not gonna do this, what does it say? What verse was that in?
7.
Verse 7. The custom in former times in Israel concerning the redemption and the exchanging of the land, to confirm the matter, a man removed the sandal from the other. This was a manner of attesting Israel. So basically, I think this the removing of the sandal and handing it away was supposed to be something, a bit of shame, or basically saying, I'm not going to fulfill my role, and so I take off my sandal and hand it to somebody. I think it's supposed to show like I'm kind of in a more shameful state for not doing what I was supposed to, and so therefore, I take off the shameful part of my clothing, something like that. It's been a while since I've read that, but I think that's kind of what's going on. Either way, it's a Israelite custom that we're not going to be able to relate to very well, but it's like a contract type thing. This was my part, and now I'm handing it to you. So, do you want to just keep reading this chapter? It's not a lot longer. Sure. It would be helpful for me. Somebody want to read? Pick up in verse 9.
I think Karina told me she wanted to read.
Do you mind?
Sure, what chapter is it?
Oh no! Oh,
No, that's okay. She was taking notes.
Oh no, I didn't mean to do that.
Are you good with it?
Sure.
Chapter 4, verse 9.
Where do you want me to stop?
Hello.
Do you want me to read the rest of it?
Go to verse 15, 9 through 15.
Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, "Today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses." Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah." So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons has given him birth."
Good job. There's a few things interesting here. One is is it the women or maybe the men in verse 12 saying, "May your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah." Anybody know what story that was? This was that really weird one in Genesis. No, where was it? What was it, Genesis? Was it Genesis or Exodus? Maybe it was Exodus, where Judah, who was one of the sons of Jacob, went and got a prostitute who ended up being his daughter-in-law. Crazy story.
Oh, yeah.
Y'all remember that one? So why they used this for a blessing, I'm not really sure. But they did. So there was something that was good out of that one. But that was another story where someone in just a crazy predicament ended up in the genealogy of David and then Jesus. So again, that may be sort of what the author is doing here. But I just wanted to throw that out because it's like, why are they blessing in that way? Before we move forward, we need to just do one last zoom out and see what we're seeing in this man, Boaz. Boaz is the faithful Israelite who has just redeemed the land. He's a redeemer who has redeemed the land. He's not only redeemed the land, he saved the Israelite woman. He saved the woman who is Israel. But not only that, he's taken a bride from the nations that has turned to the God of Israel. That's what Boaz just did. Faithful Israelite, he redeemed the land. He saved the woman Israel, and he's taken a bride from the nations, a bride of a woman who has turned to the God of Israel. That's significant, because that's themes that run all through the scriptures, especially into the New Testament. So significant, but still it's a cool story, but why is it in the Bible? Again, why is it here? And the reason being is there is no king in Israel, and everybody's doing what's right in their own eyes, and God in the background is using monotonous human lives and human existence to bring about the kings of Israel that would eventually bring about the Savior. So let's read 16 to the end. Somebody finish it for us. Go ahead.
Naomi took the baby and cuddled him to her breast. She cared for him as if he were her own. The neighbor woman said, "Now at last, Naomi has a son again." And they named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse and the grandfather of David. This is a genealogical record of their ancestor Perez. So, you want me to read?
Yeah, go ahead and finish it out.
Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Amminadab. Amminadab was the father of Nahshon. Nahshon was the father of Salmon. Shepherd.
Salmon or salmon.
I don't know how to say that, but whatever that is, was the father of Boaz. Boaz was the father of Obed. Obed was the father of Jesse, and Jesse was the father of
So you guys ever read Matthew and Luke and seen all those annoying genealogies?
Yes.
You know why they're in there? To connect us to these type things. These genealogies would have been, we would run across this in both Matthew and Luke. And that is because we're supposed to see, oh, Jesus connects to David. And when we read through Matthew and Luke, we're supposed to remember all these crazy stories where God took foreigners and people in just dire straits and the randomest, most sinful people and prostitutes and Moabites and said, I'm going to use these people. I'm going to actually use them to bring about this promised seed that's going to redeem all of Israel, all of the world. This is the reason, to connect us to these realities. And so right here, when we read a genealogy, it's like, well, that's boring, until we know all the background and backstory that just went into this. Now a genealogy just pops, and it's full of life and communicates to us. Yeah?
I had a question. Did they drop like the whole name thing? Because I thought they had to name their child after the deceased husband.
You're right. Good, man. Yeah.
That's not his name.
So, man, that was good. So the Deuteronomy passage said if a brother dies, his brother, if a man dies, his brother is to take his wife, raise up children, and then the firstborn of the brother and the wife are supposed to name it after the deceased brother. That's right? Is that how it went? And that didn't happen here. Yeah, I don't know. One, this isn't a deceased brother, it's a deceased relative. So that might be what's going on.
Well, who would they name it after? Lehman? Or Lehman? Lehman, like, or it doesn't even say who Ruth married. It says the two brothers, the two wives, but it doesn't say who was married to who.
Yeah, it doesn't. Dude, I like your mind. Yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff we need to notice. I don't know why, but they named him Obed instead of the name of the deceased husband. Yeah. Good eye though. Anybody else?
Yeah, I had a question. So when she goes to the threshing floor and she's like beat stuff and all that, do they,
No.
Okay, I was curious. I was
No.
like, this is kind of weird. They ain't married yet.
No, they don't.
I remember saying there was innuendos, but like.
Yeah, again, these would be like maybe some customs that we don't know yet or don't know anymore. I'm sure it's somewhere in a commentary and I just missed it. The ones that I did read, it was like there is some innuendo, not like, it's more like maybe flirting almost, but basically like making my intents clear. Also, I'm asking for your covering and yeah, that type of stuff.
I'll say it might be sort of stretched, but maybe it's a sign of like servitude. You know how like Jesus washed the feet, so like he was being a servant. Maybe it's kind of like that.
Yeah, I actually, there might be something there actually. I think that's good. Like I'm gonna come, how would you say it? Again, because it's asking for your covering, for your security, and this is a patriarchal society, so the male, it would be the head of the family type thing. So could be something like that. Yeah.